The sun was bleeding across the open plains, a fiery red smear sinking low behind the distant buttes, as the wind whipped through the brittle prairie grass like 1,000 rattlesnakes hissing in the dusk. The wagon creaked and groaned over the hard-packed trail, its wheels kicking up a cruel storm of dust. And behind it, tied by a rough, splintering rope that bit into her wrists and burned against her skin, was Mary Lynn Dalton, her body bruised, dress torn, hair tangled with dirt and blood. The wagon belonged to her own kin, men whose faces she'd trusted once, but that evening their eyes were harder than stone and colder than a grave. Her uncle had ordered her punishment for defying a marriage she never wanted, for daring to say no to a man with money and power. They called it teaching her obedience. To her, it was betrayal. The coarse rope dragged her like a broken doll through the dust, her knees scraping open, her breath shallow. Every bump sent agony through her spine. The sky above dimmed into an iron gray, and the world blurred between pain and fear. Just miles away, a lone rider cut across the prairie like a streak of steel and fire. Caleb Hart, known in those parts as Iron Colt, was a cowboy forged by hardship and loss. He'd buried too many good souls beneath western soil, and he'd sworn long ago never to turn away from cruelty. His stallion, a dark Mustang with a white blaze on its nose, pounded the ground like thunder chasing lightning. Caleb's sharp eyes caught a shadow moving against the wagon trail far ahead, something that didn't sit right in his gut. He kicked his heels into his horse's flank and rode hard, dust curling behind him like smoke. As he neared, he saw her, a woman, bound and choking on the dirt, being dragged like nothing more than a broken tool. Caleb's jaw clenched, his pulse quickened, and a fury older than his scars lit inside him like a flame in dry grass. He lowered himself in the saddle, pulling his hat tighter against the wind. The wagon was moving fast, but Caleb had learned long ago that some fights weren't about speed, they were about heart. He leaned forward, spurred the Mustang harder, and the distance closed like a hunter stalking prey. The men on the wagon hadn't noticed him yet, laughing and swigging from a whiskey bottle as the woman they once called family bled behind them. Caleb's hand hovered near the worn leather grip of his revolver, but something inside told him this wasn't a shootout he wanted to start from afar. He wanted to look them in the eyes. Mary Lynn's vision blurred between the spinning wheels and the endless trail. She thought she might die there, bones ground to dust beneath wagon ruts. But then, through the haze, she heard it, a deep, powerful rumble. Hooves. A rider. For a moment, she thought it was another torment coming for her, but as the pounding grew louder, she caught a glimpse of a dark figure slicing through the red light of sunset, riding with a purpose she'd never seen before. Her heart thudded in weak hope. The first bullet snapped past Caleb's ear, whistling like a hornet. One of the men had spotted him. Caleb didn't flinch, he leaned low, horse weaving through the flying dirt as another gunshot cracked the air. He drew fast, his revolver flashing once, and the lead gunman howled, clutching his shoulder as his rifle dropped from the wagon. The others cursed and scrambled, the horses pulling the wagon growing restless at the sudden chaos. Caleb guided his Mustang alongside the rear wheel, matching its speed, dust choking the air like smoke from a battlefield. "Hold on," he shouted over the wind, his voice cutting through the pounding hooves. Mary Lynn barely managed to lift her head. Caleb drew his hunting knife, the steel glinting in the dying sun, and in a smooth, deadly arc, he sliced through the rope binding her. She fell hard, rolling across the dirt like a rag doll. Caleb yanked the reins, swung off the horse mid-run, and caught her just as the wagon lurched forward. He dragged her out of the path of the back wheel, the thunder of hooves just missing her legs. The wagon sped ahead, the men too panicked to turn back, shouting curses as they vanished into the darkening trail. Caleb knelt beside her, breathing hard, sweat and dust streaking his face. Mary Lynn coughed, blood on her lips, eyes wide with shock and pain. "You're safe now," he rasped, voice low but firm, like an oath carved in stone. She stared at him, half in disbelief, half in fragile hope. For the first time in days, the rope was gone, and someone had chosen to stand between her and the cruelty of those who called themselves family. He lifted her gently, cradling her bruised frame in his arms as if she were something fragile and worth saving, because to him, she was. The Mustang snorted and stamped, ready to ride. Caleb mounted the horse with her in his arms, steady as a rock, and turned toward the fading light of the west. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know her story. But he knew one thing: no one deserved to be left in the dirt. As they rode toward a small creek miles away, the night wrapped around them like a dark curtain. She leaned against his chest, shivering, and he whispered low, "Ain't nobody talking you like that again. Not while I draw breath." Those words, spoken like a vow under the endless western sky, settled into her heart like an ember waiting to burn bright. Behind them, the wagon's laughter was long gone. Ahead, the stars were coming out, one by one, like tiny witnesses to a rescue that would be remembered in whispers around campfires. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and dust, but for the first time, it also carried a quiet promise of survival. Caleb knew trouble would follow. The kind of men who dragged their own kin didn't give up easy, but he'd faced worse before. And Mary Lynn, though broken and bruised, had a spark in her eyes that said she wasn't done fighting either. Tomorrow, the West would wake too. Another day of hardship and grit. But tonight, a cowboy had ridden through fire to pull a woman out of hell. And that was worth everything. The night was quiet, but Mary Lynn couldn't forget the sound of those wagon wheels grinding against the earth, dragging her through the dust like something less than human. She sat by the creek, shivering under Caleb's worn duster, watching the water ripple beneath the pale moon. Her wrists were raw, her voice still hoarse, but the weight of that rope was gone. Caleb crouched nearby, feeding the fire with small sticks, his head pulled low, jaw clenched in thought. He wasn't a man of many words, but the silence around him was steady, safe. "You ain't gotta fear them no more," he said finally, not looking at her but staring into the flames like they were old enemies. "What they did, that ends here." Mary Lynn swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "They're my blood, Caleb. My uncle, my brothers." His eyes lifted, cold and sharp like forged steel. "Then they're the wrong kind of blood." Something in her chest cracked open. No one had ever said it out loud, not with that kind of certainty. Caleb tore a strip of cloth and gently wrapped her wrists. His touch was rough, but careful, like a man who'd spent too long mending wounds that weren't his. She winced, and he paused, meeting her gaze, not pity, but respect. Far across the plains, faint lantern lights flickered. They both knew those men wouldn't let her go without a fight. Caleb holstered his revolver slowly, his voice low and steady. "They're comin'. But they'll find me between them and you." Mary Lynn's heart pounded, not with fear, but with something fierce and alive. She'd been dragged in the dirt. Now she was standing, beside a man who rode into a storm just to cut her free.